Hello, all, and welcome to SETTRA's video series session. We are filming a new video for you today, and the topic is on resident sentiment on tourism. This is a really fascinating topic that a lot of us have really gotten interested in. We've got two really cool researchers in our field in tourism that are here to talk to us a little bit about resident sentiment on tourism. We have Dr. Bynum Boley from UGA, and we have Maria Henson, who's the Director of Research and Insights for Visit Orlando. Welcome, guys.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. So, you guys have just are both now on the Southeast Travel and Tourism Research Association board. Maria, welcome as a new board member. We're so excited to have you. Bynum, I know you've been with us for a while. We just started this new video series, and so we're going to keep it really light and informal. First, I just wanted to kind of chat. The three of us decided on this topic together as something we were all interested in. Bynum, what do you think it is about resident sentiment research that interests you? Why is it relevant right now for our industry?
Well, residents are one of the primary stakeholders of tourism, but also, often our research focuses just on the tourist and what makes them satisfied. And we kind of forget that resident satisfaction can actually influence the tourist experience. If you have residents that are on board with what you have to offer, they're proud, they buy into the tourism industry, they're really great hosts. They can be helpful, they can steer people in the right direction. But if you have residents that are frustrated by the level of tourism or the type of tourism, they really can kind of be antagonistic and potentially sink your tourism industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Maria, what about you? What interests you about sentiment research on tourism?
I think I'm looking at it slightly from a different lens. So Bynum brought a really good point of kind of mashing the experience together. For us at Visit Orlando, we're obviously one of the largest destinations in the country, and tourism is a tremendous economic driver for the local community. And us at Visit Orlando are quite aware of that, and some of our major, stakeholders are aware of that. But what we wanted to know is, do our residents know what it means for the community? Do they understand and distinguish between the benefits of the tourism versus what is their feeling like about the challenges that come with it? So that's kind of the angle that we were taking when we were looking at resident sentiment.
Cool. I've been in tourism, I guess, for about 15, 16 years now. And when I first started in tourism, nobody was talking about the resident. It was all about the visitor. But now it's kind of something that's on all of our minds. What changed? Why does the tourism industry now care about what the resident thinks? What do you guys think?
I think it could be like that certain areas are, experiencing a lot of tourism pressure, and that residents are maybe kind of revolting a little bit and giving the Convention and Visitor Bureaus or the DMOs a hard time about the level of tourism. And so, there's some legislation at different communities that's been enacted that's not really tourism friendly. And so DMOs are starting to listen, but hey, we're more than just a destination marketing organization. We're kind of blending into this destination management organization. And part of that is making sure resident quality of life is benefited from tourism.
And that's exactly right. The latter part of what Bynum just said, some of the pressures locally, we want these residents to be ambassadors every day. This is an ecosystem. We have to make sure that we all can coincide. And yes, there's give and takes, but if we don't know what those give and takes are, we can't make the whole ecosystem function in the best way that is possible.
Okay. Maria, what's the risk with not engaging your residents?
You don't know what you don't know. And I have been blessed to be an organization and a destination that has been honestly not feeling a lot of pressure from the resident for a long time. I mean, we're just so large and so spread out, and some of the issues that some of the small destination or coastal destinations are having, we haven't really had that experience. So we've been blessed to not really even really think about it. The last time we did resident sentiment study was in 2009.
Oh, wow.
So to your point, Shannon, you're saying, why is it suddenly an issue? Well, we really need to know, how do they feel? What is they thinking? Do we make assumptions that are not really there? And some of those assumptions may be actually negative assumptions that the resident doesn't even carry. So we needed to have the answers. We needed to know, can we rely on our community, and not just the residents themselves, but also community leaders? Can we lean on them to help us bring the destination and the impact that the tourism is having to the place that is beneficial to both the industry and to the local community? Otherwise, you're kind of in trouble all around.
But so the last time you did research was in 2009?
That was before the last wave in 2022. So last year we resurrected and almost started a new benchmarking when it comes to the whole resident sentiment and local leader sentiment, to really be able to gauge that. And we're going to be hopefully on a biannual cadence on it. So our next wave is going to be next year.
I'd love to hear more about the study you guys are doing. So 2009 to 2022 is a big gap. Tell me a little bit about tell everybody a little bit about what led you to this decision that you're going to start doing more regular waves.
Well, what Bynum brought up, some of the new dynamic in the community, and coming from local legislature, coming from local government, coming from the state government, honestly, state legislature for the state of Florida, really made us stop and think, do we need to start bringing our resident into the fold? And can we quote them as supporters of the industry and know that we can stand behind the quotes and what we're citing? And honestly, there were a lot of assumptions, both negative and positive, that honestly nobody knew the answers to. Wow. And we said, all right, it's time to revisit the topic and see how the whole ecosystem changed. How are they feeling? What are they thinking? Are they even thinking?
Right.
I mean, is it even the thing? Or is it
your
just
longitudinal focus is very unique. Not, a lot of people just do these kind of snapshots in time of where residents are at, which is helpful, but having it every 2 years would help you kind of have a benchmark of where you're at, and then you can identify different impacts, both positive and negative, and see perceptions of residents on those, cost of living, traffic, different entertainment amenities that come from tourism. And if something is a problem, traffic or housing, and you work to solve that, you can see if the residents are responding in that manner, if the longitudinal.
That is exactly the purpose. And Florida has also been one of the states that has seen a huge influx of new residents over the last couple of years because of the pandemic. There was massive movement from particularly Northeast. So we have new base that has not really seen what that looks like, living in Orlando and seeing. I mean, we had 74 million visitors to our destination last year.
Wow.
So there's a lot happening here. So we definitely need to, and Bynum, to your point, it's not just even the benchmark for our own performance and knowing where we're at, but we're also the partner that we use to help us with the study. We wanted to make sure it was a full-on third party. I mean, we did not want any kind of subjectivity entering the conversation. They actually have access to a national representation. So we're able to look at how we gauge against the rest of the country, and maybe some of the groupings of the destinations across the country, to really be able to have a conversation on a more holistic level.
Yeah, that kind of helps is it really a problem, because a lot of people like to complain about everything, but having, a kind of standard across the country or the world, that I haven't heard of that. That's really cool. Wanted to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's honestly, I think that's one thing that, and whatever, if the listeners are other DMOs, choosing the right partner to conduct a study of that nature is so critical. And it doesn't mean that every partner meets every DMO's needs, because you have different budgets, you have different issues. And yes, you want to streamline and develop the questionnaire and that question set that really meets your criteria and your destination and the dynamic that's going on in your community and some of the issues that you're looking to really gauge. But the partner is so important. I mean, we've looked at so many, ended up using this particular agency, and they've been phenomenal on so many levels because they have experience. They have that national benchmarking capabilities, which was really important for me. I don't know, Bynum, for you, when you go in and talk to conversations with Shannon, even you in your life, everybody wants to know, well, okay, so there's that number on the wall. What does it mean? Is that good, bad? where are we at? And so I always, every time I go with any tracker, especially like that, is can I gauge myself against a comparable set?
Very cool. Very cool. And real quick, 'cause I want to move on to what Bynum's experiences in this industry, but I'm curious. Can you talk a little bit about what was different for Orlando residents than it was for the other residents in that benchmarking set?
We literally, I'm using that word blessed again, because Bynum, to your point, we thought it was actually going to be worse. Now, we didn't think that we were going to be in a place like, unfortunately, some of the destinations like Hawaii has experienced some tremendous challenges with residents. Now, we didn't expect us to hopefully be, you know, at some of those lower levels, but we were curious. I mean, we really had no idea where we're going to end up. And we ended up being at probably one of the 19th percentile is where we ended up on the scoring on a lot of the metrics. But it was a definite discovery project for us, really pulling it apart, understanding what is the understanding of the benefits of the tourism industry, what are the challenges, what is the middle ground, where are residents even aware of what it does, what it impacts, where the funding for organization like Visit Orlando comes from. That was another piece of the resident study for us. It wasn't just the tourism industry overall, but also DMO. Because we are all in the DMO world. Now, Bynum, I don't know, before you ended up in the tourism industry, did you know what DMO was? I mean, we were CVBs for a long time. We have now fancy names that are evolving.
Right.
But does the community know who we are, what we do? Do they support us? Do they not? Do they care? There were so many questions out there, and it really allows us to read. And I think there were a lot of pleasantly surprising outcomes for us, but there's definitely an opportunity to bridge some gaps and really work as a destination on some of those larger topics, like you were talking about affordable housing, you know, wages, is it low wage jobs? And we're going to have a whole conversation about that whole
that is a whole nother
dilemma. Yes.
video. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's impressive that you ended up in the 90th percent. I just did some math real quick. 7.2 million visitors and 300,000 plus residents. They're outnumbered like 25 to 1. So the fact that you are able to get them, you know, that residents are pleased with tourism, that's great. Clearly you're doing something right.
Yes. I mean, we have been, the whole community kind of supports it. I mean, tourism jobs just direct, we employ almost a third of the destination. So a third of the community is employed in some way. And that's not
like it's so visible in Orlando that, you know, it's such an iconic destination. You know, people are very aware of how many tourists are coming there. Sure.
And what a good segue, because this is resident sentiment is very different. If you are in a place where you're used to seeing tourism, it's clear what the impact is. You see the roads being developed, you see education being supported. And in a place like Florida, where you don't have income tax, that, you know, the funding models of those become even more important. But Bynum, you're used to working with smaller destinations and rural destinations, right? So Bynum is the Associate Professor of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management at the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources at UGA. Bynum, tell us a little bit about what you've been into, what you've been getting into recently in terms of resident sentiment.
Sure. I've been studying resident sentiment for about 10 years now. It started with my dissertation with a few communities along the Blue Ridge Parkway in rural Virginia. And kind of a big, you know, research question is, why do residents support or oppose tourism? And kind of the traditional understanding was that if you're employed in tourism, you support it, right? You know, it's your income. And then the residents that aren't employed in it, you know, they're kind of either kind of apathetic about it or maybe antagonistic towards it. But I kind of have developed some measures that are non-economic focused. I'm looking at how residents' pride and self-esteem is built up from tourism.
Oh, how cool.
Or I call it psychological empowerment. Like, hey, we're unique, we're special, like we have something to offer. You know, the flip side of that would be like, I'm embarrassed. I can't believe the DMO is promoting us in this mindset, like in this view. Like, you know, I feel like we're being commodified. So, you know, positive would be pride and self-esteem. The negative of that would be kind of embarrassed or feel like they're taken advantage of. And we have a measure of how tourism brings the community together. They feel more cohesive, more collaborative, or is it like creating factions, which can be really felt at the small scale, right? Orlando's got a lot going on, but in these small rural communities, the people in tourism and not tourism, that be fighting, or even those within the tourism industry are fighting amongst themselves possibly. And then there's kind of political empowerment, which is, do residents feel like they have a voice in how tourism's developed? And basically my big finding is that if residents' pride and self-esteem can be enhanced from tourism, like they feel unique and special, then they're all in. They support tourism, even if they're not employed. If you can like help them to feel unique and special. And I think that's kind of where this win-win works, that if you have these unique natural and cultural resources that you can protect and then promote and market what's unique about a place, you're attracting a more sustainable tourist that's interested in that, and you have the residents that are on board with that destination image you're promoting.
Love the idea of giving residents a reason to be proud of the place that they live. We go into a lot of destinations too, and it's pretty clear when you go into a destination and start talking to the locals that, you're into tourism. We're working with tourism. What do you think about tourism? And it's either we get a lot of tourism. Why would anyone come here? And then, your heart kind of breaks a little bit and you're like, okay, I see where we are and where we need to go. On the other hand, you'll get residents who are like, I love living here. I tell all my friends and family, they have to come down, check out the square or whatever it is. How are you guys able to, what metrics do you use to measure community pride? How do you do
I've
that?
got like a 5-item scale, maybe it's too academic talking about that. That says, tourism to my county makes me feel special. Tourism to my county, boost my self-esteem. Tourism in my county makes me feel like I have something to offer others. There's a kind of a set of questions that we take the average of those and say like if they're psychologically empowered or not. And
Yeah,
that's a great predictor of their support. So the more they feel psychologically empowered, the more likely they are to support tourism.
Wow.
We have something similar on our end as well, not as in depth on a psychological component, but I think we try to, it's a usual approach of kitchen sink to having every metric you can possibly have in the study and cover off all the bases. But the idea of the pride, I am proud to welcome visitors into my community, is definitely a major item on the survey. I seek out interactions with visitors proactively is something that is really important for us, because we know, a third is employed in the tourism industry. I need you to support the industry. I need you to love it. I need you to be passionate about it, because your direct face-to-face interaction with these guests is what makes the experience and what allows for that positive word of mouth and the return visitation. And that's how you grow your base. So that is definitely absolutely Bynum. Those are some key things that we
One
have.
of my colleagues, Kyle Woosnam here at University of Georgia, has a measure of emotional solidarity, just basically how close is the connection between the residents and the tourist. And the closer the residents are to the tourists, like they can, see themselves like them. Basically, it's the type of tourist that they want to hang out with and spend time with, the more they're going to support it. If you have a tourist market that brings a lot of negative impacts, that is very different from the residents, that can cause more conflict, which leads to less support for the industry.
So Bynum, did you find in your study that those who are directly employed or engaged in the industry are more likely to support it? Was that validated in your
Sure, that's validated, for sure. The economic impacts or personal economic benefits from tourism always influence one's support. And they also influence the perceptions of the negative impacts. So things like crowding, livability, trash, all those things, they're less the more they are employed in it. And they're also less the more they're psychologically empowered. So those kind of the negative impacts of tourism are not as problematic for that group of people. They kind of see the greater benefits of tourism.
Bynum, I wanted to ask, you answered part of my question before I even asked it, so we're right there. My question was, how do you differentiate a community that, I was just wondering for any patterns in your work, how do you differentiate a community that does have pride versus doesn't have pride? And one of the things I heard you say was, if the visitor and the resident look alike, that's often a good indicator. And then what are the other things that you think makes one community have stronger pride over another one?
Oh, that's a good question. I think how close the destination image that the DMO is putting out there,
Oh, interesting.
like the alignment between the destination image and what the residents value, the greater the closer that is, then the residents will be like more proud.
I feel like that what you just said is huge for destination marketers because it means be careful not to overpromise because if you can't deliver the experience that you're advertising, there's a much bigger risk than just not having people come back again.
Well, and just being authentic that the message that you're advertising is the reality that the residents are living, right? If you're promoting this
Right.
image of life in this community as being all great, everybody's happy and like, like just this quality of life's amazing. And then the residents aren't living that or have that same perception of the high quality of life. Like, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, this is just for tourists. Like our lives are different. But if you can have like where what the residents live and value is what you're offering to tourists, I think that's a good alignment.
That's neat. It reminds me of we worked with Galveston, Texas for a while, and they have the beach in Galveston is unique. The silt from the Gulf of Mexico often makes that water not dirty, but silty. You can't necessarily see through, it's not clear. But on certain days of the year, the currents would clear up, the water becomes clear, and the locals call it blue water days. And there's only a few days a year where it's like that, where it looks like the Caribbean in Galveston, Texas. Well, the DMO was using only the images from Blue Water Days to
Right.
market for the whole island. And it created a real sense of disingenuity between the DMO and the residents. I mean, the residents love Galveston and they're very supportive, but it was kind of like you are misrepresenting us. We're not a tropical destination. We're not trying to be. So stop putting out this idea that we're this like tropical, clear water, blue Caribbean water destination when we're not. And that was a big takeaway of ours. And they actually had to stop, only use Blue Water Day photos on Blue Water Days. That was really interesting. Maria, is anything of what Bynum's talking about resonating with you in terms of like community pride?
Absolutely. Community pride is a huge part of the study and understanding. And I think when you're in a destination the size of Orlando, and I know you were looking at a population, and we're kind of in this boat of, do we represent Metro Orlando, which is really a much larger area where there's a lot of not rural, but more smaller communities, smaller municipalities that make up that whole market versus just Orange County, Florida, which is a massive, massive county here, one of the largest counties in the state. And I think when you have a very large community, it can become disconnected because there are very defined tourism areas and there are very defined areas where the residents are. And many times, unless you're employed and you have to engage with the travel industry because of that, people try to sometimes stay away because of certain issues of, oh, it's too crowded, I don't want to be a part of that, I'm going to avoid the restaurants where the tourists are, I want my own bar holes that I love. And sometimes it almost becomes disconnected. And you have to bring that together so that the resident is experiencing the same things that the visitor is experiencing, and to your point, having that experience. Thankfully, we have a lot of partners that are able to kind of, manage that experience and control it and make sure that it's a certain level. But sometimes what we find actually interesting, you're talking about clear days for Galveston. Well, we have certain very large attractions, I'm not going to name them, but we have a lot of other things. There's so much going on in this community. We did a research actually, and it's going to take you, I think, about 110 days to do everything in Orlando. That is here for you, that's available to you. And
that is a really cool study. What a cool way of looking at it.
You should have seen the people who were tasked with measuring it. They were really having the hard life there for about 3 months. So, but what we found is there's a lot of these small mom and pop type experiences, restaurants, shops, art boutiques, small theaters. I mean, all of them understand actually that, hey, there's that tourist, there's that visitor. Can I get a share of that? And you got to bridge that. You got to bridge all of the pockets of the community so that you can share the wealth all around. And that's actually a huge conversation here. And part of it is what we're getting drawn in some of that even legislative type conversations. You know, what is happening with the tax that's earned from the tourism. I mean, we can have yet another 60-minute session on that. So
exactly.
It's interesting to. I love hearing what Bynum has to say from, and even, you know, you sharing from Galveston, because we feel sometimes we're on a separate planet and some of the things that we're dealing with are just so unique, but there's still different challenges that you have to overcome and bridge the gaps.
Absolutely.
I was thinking of a neat project in Montana I was a part of where the residents basically curated the tourism experience for the guests, where residents were suggesting sites that they kind of embodied the character of their community. And they made these map guides of like residents suggestions of where to stay, festivals, where to eat, where to shop. And you know, it really attracted this high-end market that was spending more money than the average tourist, our research showed when we were there.
I love that because I mean, we, even though like everybody wants to know from the locals, like what's the cool stuff to do. I feel like visitors and I do fit into this segment, but visitors and a lot of visitors, maybe not everybody, but you want to have an authentic experience where you go. And a lot of times that means I want to live, what do the people that live here do? I want to live like that. So that the locals become this really valuable resource for information and almost sometimes secret information that you're not going to necessarily find if you look at a Google review, or even if you go to the DMO website. I mean, we work with a community sometimes where like the locals know all the good fishing holes, but the DMO doesn't want to put the good fishing holes on the map because for a lot of different reasons. And so, you know, trying to figure out how to connect the residents' secret local gem ideas with the visitors' kind of need for that same authentic experience is a very interesting challenge. And I love hearing how your destination did it, Bynum. That's clever.
And I think the multiplier effect is greater, right? If you drive people more to these local businesses, more of that money is going to stay in the community as well.
That's a really important part that I don't think we talk about enough, that multiplier effect, and the fact that if you're shopping at chains and malls and chain restaurants and chain stores, that money's not staying in the community like it would if you were shopping at a local. So that's another really important point, I think, in terms of, you know, we started this conversation with like, why is it important to engage the resident? And we've already talked about community pride, economic impact, you know, bringing locals back in or bringing visitors into your less visited areas. Maria, is that part of your strategy for like engaging residents, is to try to make that connection between some of the lesser known and visited attractions in Orlando or Orange County?
You're asking me to share all our secrets. All the subliminal messages are coming out right now.
No,
before I answer that question, I did want to also say that one of the reasons why we wanted to launch the study last year is to give the residents a voice. Because right now, it's not as obvious and it's not that easy. And we actually asked the question, do you feel that you are contributing? Do you feel that you have an opportunity to share and voice your concerns and voice your opinions? And it's quite clear that as a community, we can definitely do better in that space. But going back to your question on economic impact, it's really interesting that you said what you said, because we, based on the results of what we saw, we just launched Value of Tourism campaign. It's a full-on paid media effort purely in local markets to really put it front and center what the tourism does for you. We are putting these out-of-home boards in places near some of the venues that were literally 100% funded by tourism activity. We are saying, hey, tourism, Shannon, you mentioned that there's no state tax in Florida. There's a reason for it, because of tourism and the fact that tourists pretty much contribute 50% of our sales tax. I mean, our economic impact last year from the 74 million was $87 billion is what they generated in the total impact. I mean, out of that, 56 billion is direct visitor spending. I mean,
Wow.
there's a lot of contributions all across, but a lot of that, we as residents, we don't think about that. You know, Bynum said, you're not sitting there and thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, look at all these visitors here. I mean, they're helping me out on a daily basis, but we're doing that. We're literally, you should see, it's a beautiful, creative, but it's really in your face. And it makes you think, and we're hoping that we actually started it with doing some benchmarking. That resident sentiment is going to be that measurement for, are we moving the needle along? Are we building that understanding of how tremendous this industry is? It's not the only one, but again, it is ecosystem because it supports so many industries. I mean, we support lawyers, we support engineers, firework techs. I mean, it's like you look at it. Orlando Health Center is a big partner of tourism. I mean, it's definitely a powerful driver, and yes, we are using that to bridge that message.
Well, I'm not used to hearing a local DMO so that their impact is in the billions of dollars. So that's huge. That's very cool. So you took this baseline metric in 2022, and now you're actually putting in an initiative that will help you move the needle, and you're going to go back and measure every couple of years and see how the needle moved.
That is exactly right.
Wow, that's great. Let's see. So Maria, but when we were chatting before on email, you said that there was a we were talking about wanting to talk about resident sentiment on tourism, and you mentioned that on the Destinations International board, there was a bunch of people talking on that subject right now. I haven't checked it recently, but is there anything that's in those discussions that we haven't brought up yet today?
I don't think so. I think what people are looking for is how you measure, how often are you doing it, who do you talk to?
Yeah.
How do you structure the questions? So Bynum, maybe you should put out your your benchmark questions up there.
Well, tell them how I do it. I think a big issue that, I think people don't think about is there's probably going to put this on some like panel or, hey, let's put up a kiosk or, like a QR code, and they're getting a biased response from the residents. And so one thing that I've done, which is very labor intensive, but I feel like really gives every resident a voice, is we break the community, whatever it is, large or small, down into census tracts. And we figure out the proportion of residents living in each census tract. And then we allot 500 surveys across those census tracts proportionally to where people live. And then so every census tract, or every block group on down to the neighborhood level, is represented based upon how they make up the larger community as a whole. And we go door to door and we just knock on every other door. And it's usually a team of students. And, people are like, we get an 80% response rate.
Wow.
People are very, like, when there's a student out there sweating from the state university, I don't know if Georgia should go to Florida and do it, but, if it was a University of Florida or Florida State or all the other great universities down there doing it, I think they have a very high response rate. And then you get people that don't use the internet, you get people that, just that you wouldn't get using other methods.
Absolutely.
It is complex. And I mean, that is, Bynum, that is impressive.
That is impressive.
We're not that intense. We do have parameters and quotas on making sure, but yes, that subset that maybe is not on the internet may not get represented. We actually purposefully took out individuals over a certain age because we wanted a working class impact on that. So the other piece that I think we sometimes forget when we're doing resident study is you have to talk to businesses. If you are looking for that support and that ambassadorship that may be outside of your industry, you're not going to find it in just your stakeholders, your immediate constituency. You gotta veer out, and that's what we do, and it's incredible. And sometimes you make assumptions again, but we do those community leaders, and we make sure that 2/3 of those leaders have nothing to do with tourism whatsoever, just to make sure we're getting a good read. But yeah, maybe I should look into students, maybe torturing some students over the course of spring break, maybe while they're instead of having the party, we bring them in.
It's hard to say no to them when they knock on your door.
Yeah, that's a really great strategy. I really like
to think about that.
Yeah. This is just all, I think, after COVID. I mean, I'm kind of branching a little bit into kind of over tourism and this going back to this idea of why have we all started caring about listening to the residents at the same time. And for me, I think I don't know if you guys agree, but it connects back to, obviously we were having problems with over tourism in places throughout the world, like the Great Barrier Reef and Hawaii and all the national parks, which got worse after COVID. And what I think is fascinating is that a lot of the smaller destinations that we necessarily wouldn't think about that impacting are also experiencing some of that over tourism and this need for looking at, sustainability in the future. And to your point, Maria, from earlier, we have to engage our residents because they really do have the power to kind of derail the structure that a visitor needs to have a good experience. Imagine a small to mid-sized community that right now is having a lot of maybe traffic problems, noise problems. Residents are starting to get a little louder. What would you recommend that the DMO think about doing to maybe make that situation a little bit better? Would a resident survey, sentiment survey help them or hurt them? Because sometimes I have a destination saying, I don't want to ask my residents what they think because I know what the answer is.
Can't make it any better if you don't know what the problem is, So I guess there's some power and knowledge, there's like power in the knowledge of like, this is the hot button issue, and like, is it something that we can address as a DMO, or is it something that's outside of us and maybe we need to partner with somebody else to address? Or do we need an informational campaign that like, actually this is misinformation, and it's really not as bad as it seems, but like by doing the resident sentiment study, you actually are able to identify all the problems going on.
And I'm just going to add to that, complete agreement with Bynum on it. I think are you potentially well, not inflating, but putting a little bit more oil onto that fire by asking them the questions? Yes, but you're giving them the voice and they appreciate that. And the other thing that I think we as DMOs need to be really good at, don't just keep it within your organization. You got to be shouting from the top of the roof to everybody in the community, anybody who will listen. Go to your commissioners, go to your county officials, go to your court, whatever it is. I don't know, obviously we have a huge number of attractions here that we have to work with, but whatever the key players are to the experience, educate them. You can't force them to make change. You can, there's certain ways, and I know that different communities have a lot of different powers. I obviously cannot tell my major attractions how to run their business, nor do I really want to get into that. But I think education outside of just educating the resident itself, but educating all the key stakeholders that actually have a power to make a change, I think is really important until you get to a point where it's too late and your community shuts down completely and wants nothing to do with it. And at that point, it's telling them how important it to the industry is a little too late because they burn out.
I also think as DMOs kind of switch from the marketing to management, that the metric of just number of visitors might not be the metric that like shows success anymore. Resident sentiment could be the ultimate like metric of success. Like what is tourism for, right? It's often claimed to be economic development, which is supposed to help the residents and their quality of life. But if it's not adding to that quality of life at all, then like what are we doing it for? And so if the resident sentiment gets so low, you might have local government stripping bed tax dollars away from the DMOs. You might have a lot of issues where your budget is reduced potentially.
Do you think we're moving from as DMOs, do you think we're moving from a kind of KPI set of quantity, moving towards kind of quality of life measures? In other words, we've been measuring like you said, Bynum, the success of our organization, the success of our community by the volume, by the number of visitors that come, by the amount of revenue that we generate. But isn't it an interesting question to start to think about reframing that into, well, isn't the whole point of this supposed to be improving the quality of life of residents? Then why isn't quality of life of residents a KPI? That's really interesting.
It's really for more mature destinations, right? As early on, you probably want to grow things, but I think growing expenditures might be fine, but like, why grow volume? Is there a way to get markets that are, higher spending markets, you have less tourists that are more higher spending. So like the impacts are reduced. Do you not need to market during the summer, right? If that's the busy time, like work on the shoulder seasons, like rethinking how you're spending your money as a DMO to add value to the destination, not just drive numbers up.
I mean, as a DMO, you still get pressures. And I think it really going to highly depend on what kind of destination you are. But Shannon, I am definitely in agreement that there needs to be that KPI on your performance as a DMO. What is that impact and that quality of life and that acceptance? I think that needs to become definitely a prominent metric that needs to be used almost as a part of an index of some sort.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, I mean, changing it really should help you define how you market, when you market, who do you market to. And I think, yes, there's some destination that probably can be very selective when it comes to the type of visitor that they're looking for. And there's some of us that I don't have the luxury. I need to fill in my 130,000 hotel rooms. And that's kind of the challenge is your resident and your businesses in the industry, and then your business stakeholders, and then your legislature, and you have to make everybody happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's we're in a very complex scenario of playing that Game of Thrones in a way that just really puts us in the hot seat in a lot of ways, and it's an interesting place to be.
Yeah,
Makes
it's
it
not
more
easy being a
exciting.
DMO. I admire y'all. I really
It's
do.
nice being studying it from the outside, or I don't have to deal with that heat.
Well, it's been really great chatting with you guys about this. Before we let everybody go, is there anything that we didn't talk about when it comes to measuring resident sentiment on tourism that you think it's important for the folks that are listening to know?
I just think it can be a win-win-win where you can if you get the residents on board, then your tourism product is something that's going to be competitive long term because it's unique and special, right? And so like your competitive position is going to remain there, and then if they're coming there for what's unique and special, then the residents like it. So I see it as a win-win to get the residents on board and making sure that the destination image matches with what they feel like the image of their community is.
Awesome.
I definitely agree with everything that's been said, and I am going to harp again on the issue of do it right. If you're going to embark on this venture, and you should, no matter who you are, how big you are, how small you are, you should be doing that. But find the right partner, do it the right way, ask other DMOs. I'm so glad to see the conversation that's happening on Destinations International. I have destinations reaching out to me directly. There's a huge brain power that's available to us. Look at Bynum's brain here. And I think tap into it. Do not be shy. Tap in. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel, but you got to make sure your wheel is the one that actually matches your vehicle the best.
Ooh, I love that, Maria. Did you just come up with that on the top?
I just did, yes.
Wow, that is impressive. We've got some cool brains on the call today. I can't thank you guys enough for joining me. This has been a great conversation, and I think that it's very timely, and there's a lot of folks that can definitely benefit. And your point, Maria, about reaching out, this industry is a lot about sharing and not having to reinvent the wheel. We're all kind of going through similar stuff together, and that's a great point. Thanks again for your time, guys. I'm really excited to chat about this with you guys, and hopefully many more conversations to come.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
It has been. Thank you for inviting me.